Welcome to Knowledgeable Aging. I'm your host, Jason Kotar. Joining us today to talk about touch and communication between aging couples is Judith Sachs. Judith is the founder and director of Anyone Can Move, an adaptive movement program in Philadelphia. In 2019, she piloted an innovative therapy program, Close Contact for Couples, under a grant from Penn Medicine. In 2020, she was awarded a Parkinson's Foundation COE grant to improve partner communication with couples online, and in 2021 was awarded a second year. How are you doing today, Judith?
I'm great, thank you. How are you, Jason?
I'm doing well. Thank you for joining me today. I'm looking forward to our conversations, but before we get started, for those that are joining us for the live webinar, if you have any questions, you'll see a control panel on your right-hand side. Go ahead and type your questions in. Time permitting, we will do everything in our power to get your questions answered. So, Judith, I'd love to get started. Why do couples stop communicating after living together for decades?
Well, they don't think they do. They think they communicate all the time. But as many people probably on this webinar know, if you've been married to somebody for 30, 40, even 50 years, as many of my couples have been, you reach a point where you figure you can read each other's minds. You figure you know when they're feeling good, when they're feeling lousy, when you should not bring a topic up because it's just going to make for friction. You think you know all this, and therefore you don't say anything about it. And thereby lies a problem, usually. And what I have been doing in all of my programs now is to try and get people in a set of beginner's mind. So it's, remember the first time you guys were on a date? Remember the first time you decided, I think we should get married. I think we should buy some furniture. I think we should have a child. That kind of thinking is what leads to really great communication. And it's not something we typically do when we're 70, 80, 90 years old, but we can. There's no reason why we can't get back to it.
Right. So what is meant by cueing?
So cueing, which is again something we do in all my programs, if you think about going to the theater or watching a movie or watching TV, when one actor finishes speaking, the other person, that's their cue for their next line. It's not always a verbal cue, right? Sometimes they give them a look or they turn and look angry over their shoulder. Whatever that is, it's an indication that it's your turn to speak or your turn to do something. So cueing, again, can be, I give you a verbal cue, you say hello to me, I say hello to you. It can be a touch. It can be, I want to lift your arm, but I want it to be like dead weight. And now I want it to be like there's just a butterfly on top of my hand. It can be eye contact. Again, one of the big problems with knowing somebody so well and being with them so long is that you very often don't look each other in the eye. You're busy doing this and that, and we're all so distracted these days by either social media or what's on television or what's on the news. So what I try and do is to bring people back to a variety of different cues. Some work better for some couples than others. So that's where we go together.
Yeah. Now, what is our center of gravity, and how does that change as we age?
So the center of gravity is a principle in physics, right? Everything probably has two sides. When you're weighing something on scales, you know, you put the heavy can of 28 ounces of tomatoes over here and an apple over here, right? And how do you balance it? You have to put something else heavy on the scale to balance out that apple. In the human body, our center of gravity sits kind of between the top of the head and where our two legs part. And so usually, if there's nothing the matter with if our balance is okay and our supportedness on the ground is okay, our center of gravity is right in between the legs. And we have equal balance on both feet on the ground or on the floor. When you start to move, and And here again, it's hard because we're just talking about it.
Right.
When you start to move forward, you have to shift your weight. What I'm doing is moving one hand down, so it feels heavier on one side than the other. You have to shift your weight to one side of your body and lighten the other side so that you can pick that foot up and move it forward or move it backward or sideways, whatever you're doing with it. Then you have to catch up with the first foot. And that gives us our balance. It gives us our gait, walking forward. And it modifies all the organs in the body, especially also our head, neck, and eyes, because what we think of as balance is controlled by the vestibular nervous system. So this is what the inner ear does. The inner ear has things called crystals, and they move in a kind of a gel solution, which moves backwards and forwards. So if I tip my head, right now I'm tipping my head up toward the ceiling. So my inner ears, all the crystals have gone back down toward my neck. And then if I tip my head forward, I'm looking at the floor, it tips the other way. As we get older, all of this stuff starts hardening, right? We know we get stiffer in our body, we get stiffer in our spine. It's harder to keep balance in between 2 feet. And it certainly is harder, and I'm sure many people out there have fallen. Over the age of 65, 1 in 4 people fall once a year. And once you have taken a fall, it is more likely that you will fall again for a variety of different, both physical and psychological reasons. Getting that center of gravity back is really critical. And one of the ways we do that in my programs is we practice getting out of balance and coming back into balance. So now I want to talk about the center of balance when you're working with a partner, when you're walking down the street with somebody, say, I'm 5'2". Jason, I bet you're taller than that.
6'1".
6'1", okay. So if Jason and I wanted to walk down the street holding hands, or with him with his arm around my shoulder, you will understand how his center of gravity and my center of gravity in some way have to coincide. We have to make those adjustments with one another. And if one of us has just had a hip replacement, I've had 2, by the way, or if one of us has had a stroke or is going through cardiac rehab, probably the sense of balance in one person is going to be very different from the center of balance with their partner. So in these classes, we're always trying to work together on ways in which we can accommodate one another's center of balance and make it, for the time that we're really together, make it much more aligned. If I were on a television set, I would really be able to show you what I'm doing.
That's fine. That's fine. That makes sense. Your motto is giving partners support. If one person has a chronic medical condition, does it fall on the other person to support them?
Well, very often it does. And I think that's why we've had these labels of somebody's a patient and somebody's a care partner. And again, if you think of the roles that people play as they're married or they're living together for many, many long years and decades, having those labels kind of separates the couple. And what I try to do in my programs in all different types of ways is say, the helper's going to help the helpee. So I'm just thinking of one particular couple. He had had a stroke and he was in a rollator, which is, it's like a walker with a seat. So it's not quite a wheelchair, but it is an accommodation to somebody who has difficulty standing and maintaining balance by himself. And he was a good deal larger, taller, heavier than she was. And in my program, which I'm going to talk about in a minute, called Close Contact for Couples, one of the things that we do is help our partners out of a chair. And of course, if somebody's in a rollator or in a wheelchair, the person for whom there's this great burden, right, is how do I get him up? How do I get him out of the seat and make a transfer to the car? How do I make a transfer to the bed? So one of the things that we work on is getting your center of gravities together, and then we start to rock. And what I ask is the person in the seated position, because remember, you're not only going from seated to standing, you're going from back to front. So you're leaning back in the chair, and then you're leaning forward as you rock. Your partner is going to stand and hug you from the front to behind, and depending on how big the person in the chair is, you get your hands in a certain position and open your fingers so you have maximum touch on their back. And then I ask the person who has to get up to start the counting. We're going to rock, and 1 and 2 and 3. Right now I'm rocking forward and back in my chair. And I'm going to say to my partner, on that count of 3, we're both going to lean toward one another, get our centers of gravity together, and stand. So this woman, again, who is smaller and shorter, she said, you know, I've just been going in back of him and lifting his good side. He'd had a stroke, and so one side was all right. The other side was really not very functional. And she said, and I end up really hurting my back. I'm kind of yanking him out of the chair. And then the two of us kind of look at each other, and he doesn't feel good. I don't feel good. And then we have to continue whatever we were doing. I said, well, let's try this technique, which I call the hug. I said, I want you to hug him. She put her arms around him, and I said, Herb, I want you to start counting. Tell her, if you're not ready to get up on 3, you say, and 4. She'll know, because you're going to say and. And they begin to rock, and 2. He said, I'm going to get up, and 3. They stood up together. They got their center of gravity together. And she turns to me and says, he feels so light. And I just started laughing, because I said, that's exactly what we're aiming for. We're really aiming for, how are the two of you going to cooperate, communicate? And the point was, they were touching differently. She wasn't being the yanker, the puller. They were working together to create this kind of new entity, which was the Herb and Ina entity. And they were working together to do an activity, which was getting up out of the chair. So your question about, does the helper help the helpee? He really had. He gave her the cue. The cue was and 3, and he was ready. They looked each other in the eye first, then they hugged, then they began rocking, and then she could feel the momentum of his body, because they were really up against each other. I find it's really interesting. I've been working, of course, on Zoom in this program now for the past 2 years, because we couldn't be in a room together. And I've always found it interesting. It's a 6-week class called Close Contact for Couples. And again, this spans people with Parkinson's, with cardiac rehab, with stroke, with MS. I've always been interested to see how initially they are touching in a very hesitant way, because I'm asking them to do different things, to come together in different ways. And it's not something they're used to. And then by the end of the 6 weeks, they're laughing together. And that's, again, one of the big, great things about this program, is that people think, oh my goodness, why weren't we doing this a long time ago?
Right.
So it really turned out very, very well for him and for her. There was another couple I want to tell you about, Jason. He was very young onset Parkinson's. He was in really, really good shape. And he said, I want to take this program while I'm in great shape and I can learn all these exercises. And if later on Nancy and I really need them, then I'll have it in my muscle memory. And this was a guy who had done a lot of athletic stuff in his life. I think he was in his 50s. And they were snowbirds. So they would go down to Florida in the winter so that he could complete his, 400 miles on a bicycle around greater places in Florida. And they were in the midst of this program and really enjoying it when she had a heart attack. And so suddenly he was the care partner and she was the person who needed care. And the two of them said, oh my goodness, because they had to really switch this partnership. It was great that they had had the experience earlier of each one helping the other to do something or other, whatever it was in my program, because they understood it was definitely possible. No, it doesn't mean that if you are seated in a wheelchair, you're going to be able to help your partner around the room necessarily. But there will be other things that you can be doing seated that will help the partner. So the answer to your question is it doesn't fall on the other person to support them. The point of my programs is, why have you been married all this time? Why have you been partnered all this time? You don't have to be married, but you're there to support each other and to cooperate with each other. And that's what I want to get across to these people.
I want to follow up on, you were mentioning the idea of doing this close contact for couples via Zoom. Are you back in person doing these courses or this 6-week program yet?
No, we're not.
Okay.
I have been speaking with, I'm affiliated both with Penn Medicine here in Philadelphia and also with the Cleveland Clinic, the Lou Ruvo Center for Brain Health in Las Vegas, Nevada. And in both instances, the hospitals, although patients are coming into the hospital to see their providers, all of the additional resources, and mine is one. We also have a Dance for Parkinson's class. There's a Rock Steady boxing class. All of these are not yet back in the vicinity of the hospital. The other thing is that if you're going into any medical care facility these days, you're still masked. And one of the points of my program is I really want them to see one another's facial expressions. I want them to see the other couples on screen. So we're working usually with 4 or 5 couples on Zoom at a time. So they all get a lot of personal attention, but they also can advise one another, which has really been terrific this year. And I like the idea that they are in their own home. They're moving around their bedroom, their kitchen, their bathroom, and really understanding what it takes to cooperate in that space they know so well. And just like, why do you not communicate with your longtime partner? Why do you not see that that chair has always been in the way and you should move it if you want to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night?
Right. I want to shift to the 5 levels of touch. How can we use them with ourselves and with a partner?
Again, this is something I try and teach people that nobody has ever kind of mentioned to them. When we touch a partner, it's usually, that's a buddy kind of touch. That's when I just kind of plop my hand on my shoulder and pat it. Maybe if I'm stroking a cheek very, very delicately, as I'm doing right now, it's a grandparent touch. It's how do I look at this beautiful child in my arms or sitting next to me on the porch and touch them delicately. Between one another, in terms of couples, I try and teach levels of touch. So we start with what in the old days, when I'm in the 60s, we used to call it touching the aura. So the aura is actually the heat shield around the body. You can, if you take these thermal pictures, you see that our 98.6 or whatever we are, it radiates a little bit. Even if I hold my hand next to my own neck, I can feel warmth coming from it. So if you hover your hands above your partner's shoulders or around their ears and neck, you will feel that first layer of touch. They will feel you touching them because your heat comes to meet their heat. The second layer is just touching the clothing. So you're basically lying down. I have couples, usually one is seated and the other standing behind them, and then we switch places. If the seated person can't get up because functionally it's too difficult, I have them seated behind one another in 2 chairs. So the second level of touch, you just lay your hands on your partner's shoulders, just like a butterfly has landed. It's hardly skimming the surface. The third layer of touch is what's it like to touch the skin under your clothing? So without taking any clothing off, what we do is simply consolidate what's going on in your palm, in your fingertips. How do you feel the radiation of that heat and the physical presence of your partner's body? So that's third layer. The fourth layer is the muscle underneath the skin. And that we have to get in a little bit deeper. So we have to use our own muscles, again, in our fingertips. Fingertips in the animal world, if you think about like the pods on the side, on the caterpillar, that's how he walks, that's how he perambulates. We have to do that by making our muscle in our hands and palm connect to the muscle in our partner's back or neck. Just moving in, not taking it in and out and tapping, but really staying there and feeling. And then the fifth layer of touch is the bone underneath the skin, underneath the muscles. In order to do that, we really have to get a good grip. We have to hold on. We have to feel, maybe with the pads of the fingers, what is going on underneath. We have to keep asking our partner, does this feel okay for you? If somebody has just had a rotator cuff injury, we're not going to try and feel the bone, right? We're going to be really much more gentle about that. And then we back out. So from bone to muscle to skin to clothing to the heat shield. By doing this, what I'm doing is getting partners to be really sensitive to one another's presence, physical presence. They're not talking, they're not looking at each other at this point, but they're really using their sense of touch as the fifth sense that it is. Like, I'm constantly talking to you now. If I shut up and all I did was convey what I was feeling, what I was saying, just by looking at you, you'd have a very different impression of what was going on. And that's what I'm trying to get couples to do again. Beginner's mind about what touch is. From these 5 layers of touch, the other thing we do, especially when partners are going to need some kind of assistance in and out of chairs or beds or whatever, is we think about weightedness and stickiness. So I say in all of my classes, you have no thumbs, because thumbs are what make for grabbing. And right now I'm grabbing my own hand with all of my fingers and my thumb, and it really feels terrible. And you can do that to yourself and figure it out. Yes. So what we do is with an open hand, like you had peanut butter on your hand. And what you want to do is kind of slide along your partner's arm. And that sliding gives you the same direction as though you were grabbing and pulling it. And it feels much better. Mm-hmm. I hope you're all doing this at home. Once we have done that, we think about how much weight does your partner need to give you? Again, this is helping the helper. Some days you may just feel, I just feel horrible. My physical therapist really didn't help me yesterday. I'm going to need a lot of help. So you have to verbalize that so that the partner helping you out of the chair or the bed knows they have to do double duty today. On other days, you may feel, I really feel pretty good. I think I can swing my legs out of the bed by myself. And I would like to tell you that the typical arm, my arm of a small woman, weighs 8 pounds, right? So if I'm grabbing a partner who's bigger than me, I have 16 pounds over here, he's probably, or even she's probably bigger and stronger and heavier. I don't want to have to take all that weight. And I will also tell you that the typical leg weighs 26 pounds. So imagine if you are thinking about lifting your partner's legs out of the bed, 52 pounds. That is not something anybody wants to do, and that way lies back injury for the care partner. So what we do instead is, again, we learn these techniques of rolling in the bed and leverage of one body part on another, and then the use of that rocking technique to get up.
Yeah, wow. I want to talk about, why do partners resist being playful with one another? And you already kind of touched on something else, but the idea of laughter, how important that is in a relationship.
One of the things we always do in class is I have these little 9-inch balls. I send a box of what I call the box of toys. And it's chopsticks, it's tennis balls, 9-inch balls, and a gate belt that people can use because it has handles on it if they need that. So what we do with the ball is we put the ball in between you, and you're not allowed to touch the ball with your hands. You have to move around the space with adhering to your partner with this ball until it drops, and then you have to go pick it up. Again, we can do this if one person is seated and the other is standing, or if both are standing. You can do it if both are seated too. People don't play. And if you think about when childhood evolves into, I want to stand on my own 2 feet. I want to be a strong guy. I want to be an effective woman. Unfortunately, we don't get back down on the floor with our Legos or our Barbie dolls or whatever we used to play with a partner. And the idea of play becomes, well, now we've got video screens, right? Now we have shooting paint at one another. I don't know what other ways of adults playing. But by the time you're in your 60s and 70s, the concept of play, unless you are playing with a grandchild, where it's kind of legit, you just don't do it anymore. But what a great other way to communicate with your partner, to figure out something you both really love and play with it. And it doesn't have to be far from your house. I mean, a lot of people get a lot of fun out of cooking together or gardening together. And that's certainly a kind of play, but I'm making it really concrete with these balls.
I want to step back for a second and talk a little bit more about your close contact for couples. Once we're eventually out of COVID, how do you think this program will evolve once you're back doing in-person training or sessions?
Well, I began in 2017 with this program. This program evolved out of, I am a certified dancer Parkinson's teacher. And the reason that I created this program in 2017 was that I noticed many of the couples in this dance class were pushing and shoving one another rather than dancing together. And I thought, well, dance is great. Everyone loves to dance, but they don't go home and dance. Typically, they don't even go home and turn on music. So what can we do in a room together? And that was how we started, live in a room, and where I hope to go again, using these props. And again, couples were working with one another. We didn't switch couples or switch partners, rather. The idea was also to watch other people. One of the biggest things, as I've mentioned, is falling. And so to watch other people being able to get down to the floor, I put great big gym mats in the room. And then everybody got down on the floor. I showed them how we roll. I showed them how you can help your partner roll. We used to actually start on a wall. I would say, let's switch the angle of the room. Imagine the wall is the floor. And then you're lying, and what I'm doing right now is I'm putting my arms out in space and leaning back so that I feel supported by the wall, as I can feel supported by the floor or by the bed if my partner is trying to roll me. So I'm definitely hoping that I can go back into these spaces. We had more couples. I think I once had 7 different couples in a live in-person room. And it, again, is great because they were giving each other tips and help. One couple started going out to dinner together. So I really hope this happens. So my website is www.anyonecanmove.com. anyonecanmove.com. And that's one word, anyonecanmove.com. My email address, if you want to get hold of me, is Judith Sachs, JudithSachs, at Mac, M as in Mary, AC as in cat.com. And my phone number is 609-577-1928. And if you're interested in any of my programs, Close Contact for Couples, Balance and Gait, or Breathing and Stretching, I would be delighted to talk to you.
Wonderful. And once again, thank you so much, Judith. As far as Knowledgeable Aging, you can go to our website, knowledgeableaging.com, and you can see all of our upcoming and archived webinars. You can go to our YouTube page, type in Knowledgeable Aging. We encourage you to subscribe. We update that several times per month. If podcasts are your thing, you can find us on Apple Tunes, Spotify, etc. Till next time, I'm your host, Jason Kotar. This is Knowledgeable Aging.